But first, let's welcome in our Friday morning panel to get us rolling, the former Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New York Post columnist and Newsmax contributor Betsy McCaughey, Project 21 Advisory Board member and radio host Christopher Arps, and joining me in studio today, WABC radio host Linda Serrani. All right, the Senate passed a bill to avert a nationwide rail strike, sending it to President Biden's desk where he is expected to sign it. Betsy, I want to start with you. I thought this was a pretty significant political move by Democrats to vote against labor. Now, I understand why they did it, but were you surprised they went so far to slap back one of the biggest unions in the country?
Well, let's face it. Even the deal that they approved is incredibly generous to the unions, and 2/3 of the unions approved it right away. It gives a 24% wage hike over 2 years. That's enormous. So the number of unions that held out for even more after 3 years of negotiation, I wasn't that surprised, frankly, because those unions had pushed as far as they possibly could. And of course, the nation would have really suffered economically and even in terms of public safety had we had to endure a big rail strike.
Chris, the Senate rejected the legislation guaranteeing 7 days of paid sick leave as part of the labor agreement. I think that was kind of expected. The vote was 52 to 43. 60
7 additional days.
7 additional, yes. The right. 60 were needed to pass. All the Democrats voted except Manchin, and all Republicans voted no except 6. Now the Republicans need to stop the left's lame duck big spending bill, and it seems like many of them may go along with it. Why doesn't it seem like they're fighting this end of year spending spree?
Well, the concern seems to be because the speakership of Kevin McCarthy is up in the air, that a lot of Republicans feel that he may not be able to get a budget passed next year. So they think that their best options is to go along with the Democrats' bill and a continuing resolution. I don't know if I agree with that so much, Tom.
Yeah, it does seem, though, that the Democrats they've got a very ambitious agenda going into this last month. They're throwing everything that they possibly can. And so far, they seem to be getting exactly what they want. Some good news, Lydia, Manchin still looks like he may be a maverick helping Republicans next session. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I hope so. I think that Manchin will come through and will, kind of just be bipartisan. I think that's what we need at this point. We need some common sense, right? We need people to reach across the aisle. That's the only way we'll be able to get some legislation passed. So at this point, I think that it is important to have somebody like Manchin that is, using just his brain. Is that too much to ask for when you are representing your constituents?
I just really...
How about spending restraint? That's what
Absolutely.
we really need.
Yeah,
that's what's pushing inflation so high, the enormous amount of government spending.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that you have that's the reason why there's an argument for a continuing resolution that keeps all of the levels at the budget that was passed in 2021 that we're operating under now, and not give them hundreds of billions of dollars in additional spending and giveaways and welfare expansion and everything else that the Democrats want. We're going to be talking a lot about that, over the next several weeks. Now, I want to move on. Yesterday, former Vice President Mike Pence joined our very own Greta Van Susteren and spoke about the media and the Hunter Biden laptop story. Take a listen.
The way the media suppressed the story of the Hunter Biden laptop in the fall of 2020 in our campaign, I thought was a disgrace. I mean, the New York Post reports a laptop was found, emails were uncovered, and literally we had social media platforms in every major news organization, with the exception of this one, that literally suppressed access to that story when a year and a half later it would be confirmed that it was, in fact, Hunter Biden's laptop, and the issues raised there ought to be vetted.
Chris, if this story was out back in 2020, could we be looking at a very different scenario in Washington today? I know that a lot of voters had said, had they known about it, they would not have voted for President Biden. I actually have an aunt in Michigan, and she voted for President Biden. And I said to her, how could you? Did you see the link between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the big guy? And she says, no, I didn't see it anywhere. I said, well, what do you watch? And she said CNN. And I said, well, there's your first mistake. And well, that was your second mistake after you voted for Biden. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, there definitely would have been a difference. As you alluded to, a lot of people said if they would have known about the Hunter Biden laptop story, they would have probably changed their vote. I also heard that a lot of people did Google searches when this story came out. Voters that had already voted absentee were trying to figure out, can they change their vote or cancel it and vote again? So this was a huge story, and it affected the election. But the overall, more important to me, is it showed the collusion between big tech and big government.
And I know, Betsy, you have something to say. And according to a Rasmussen poll, 62% of Americans approve of an investigation into Hunter Biden's business dealings. That's a majority of Americans. Do you think this should be the #1 priority for House Republicans when they take the majority in January? Or is there a trap there?
Let's expand it a little bit, because the fact is the collusion, and I use that word carefully, the collusion between the Biden administration and the big tech executives goes on. Right now, they're holding weekly meetings between big tech executives and members of the administration to decide what to censor. Big tech is taking orders from the government. Think about this. The U.S. government, according to the First Amendment, is barred from censoring what Americans see and hear. But the Biden administration is getting big tech to do its dirty work.
Yeah,
and that's what should be investigated, not just Hunter Biden.
Yeah, and look, and this is one of the reasons why Elon Musk is in the crosshairs now, because he's saying he's going to expose a lot of that collusion and that symbiotic relationship between big tech and the government, and that's why the left is going after him. Real quick question to you on our way out, Betsy. The Naval Academy this morning, I believe, has confirmed it has denied all religious accommodation requests to the COVID-19 vaccine. I know that you've been following these stories over the last 2 years. Your comments?
Well, it's likely that this could make it to the Supreme Court, and I'll tell you why. Because this court is very solicitous of our First Amendment free exercise rights. And when those are brought to the court, as you can see over the last 2 years, again and again, the justices have smacked down government efforts to disrespect religion.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to see you at the top of the hour. Now, here's Alex Kramer.